I am going to have to apologize to everybody because I did the live broadcast or thought I was doing live broadcast, and at the end of it, I'm realizing that there's a strong possibility that I was not actually live. So I'm going to repeat it just in case. So here we go. Welcome to today's broadcast of Teacher's Side Income Business. We do this every Thursday at 6. And I'm your host, Rodney Davis. Welcome. I'm a retired school social worker with 26 years in education here on the island of St. Martin. And I help career educators figure out what their expertise is actually worth in the open market. Wow. And what to do about it. So, welcome to everyone joining from LinkedIn. Welcome to everyone on Facebook. Glad you're here. I think we're doing it on YouTube as well. So let's get into it. I want to start tonight by asking you a question. I want you to actually sit with it rather than just let it pass. When someone asks you what you do, what do you say? I'll tell you what most veteran educators say. They say something like, I'm a teacher, or I'm a school counselor, or I work in special education, or I teach high school biology, something like that. And they describe their role inside an institution, right? That's how we normally describe it. And I want to spend the next 30 minutes talking about why that answer, that completely honest, completely accurate answer, might be the single most expensive habit that you have. Tonight's topic is the identity shift from public servant to private expert. Here's what I want you to understand about identity. Your identity is not just how you introduce yourself at a dinner party. Your identity is the operating system that runs every decision that you make. What you charge for, what you give away, what you believe you're allowed to ask for, and what you think you deserve. And the teaching profession, which I love, I've been giving 26 years of my life to working in education with teachers and students and their parents. This profession has been building a very specific professional identity since the first day of your credential program. Okay? That identity goes something like this. You're a professional servant. Your expertise exists to serve the public. Right? Isn't that what it says? The reward for your services is a salary set by a collective bargaining agreement and a pension you'll collect after 30 years if the system doesn't change the rules before you get there. And you don't set your own price. You don't choose your clients. You don't decide what your time is worth. The system does that for you. And here's the part that I want you to really hear. That identity made sense inside the institution. It was functional. It helped you to do your job. You know, it kept you focused on the students in front of you rather than on the actual value of what you were delivering or whether or not you were being fairly compensated. But that identity has a ceiling built into it, and the ceiling is structural. It does not move no matter how good you get, no matter how many lives you change, no matter how many years you give. Now, I've spent the last 4 years talking to you about expertise, about adult learners, about the pedagogy gap, about your niche. And some of you have been following along, you know, some of you have been downloading some of the cheat sheets. And some of you have been doing the thinking that goes along with it. And what I've noticed is that there's a moment that keeps happening. A moment where someone is right on the edge of saying, yes, this is me, I'm going to do this. And then something inside makes them pull back. And what I want to name, I want to name what that something is tonight, right? I mean, it's not a skills gap. You have the skills. You know you have the skills. And it's not a knowledge gap. You've been gaining knowledge for 15 years or however long you've been teaching. But what it is, and it's a huge problem for anybody even contemplating entering this field, it's an identity gap. And I want to address that here tonight, right? It's what I've alluded to in the beginning as an expensive thing that will keep you back unless you spend a little bit of time focusing on what it means. Okay? There's a version of yourself that you haven't yet given yourself permission to become as yet. So we're talking about the version that doesn't just teach, but charges for teaching. The version that doesn't just have expertise, but packages that expertise, prices it, and offers it to an adult audience that chooses to be there. It's a whole different ball game, isn't it? We're talking about the version that doesn't wait for a system to decide what her time is worth, but decides that for herself. That version of you has a name. I call it the private expert. And the shift from public servant to a private expert is not a career change. It's not a resignation letter. It's not a betrayal of everything that you've stood for. It's an expansion, an addition, a decision to stop limiting your professional identity to the four walls of an institution that was never going to pay you what you were worth anyway. Right? I want to pause here for just a minute, right? Because this can be a big stumbling block. I mean, I've had this discussion with quite a few people, and I'm beginning to see where it is probably the biggest stumbling block. Teachers struggle for some reason because we've never been indoctrinated to think about it as doing work for money. And within the institution, we're not focusing on it. The minute we talk about making this shift, a whole lot of questions start going off in your head about your integrity and what you're doing this for, right? So, let me tell you what the private expert identity actually looks like in practice. I need to say some things about this because it's important. Because I think people hear expert and they think it requires a certain kind of confidence that you don't have as yet, or you don't feel as yet. But a private expert knows what she knows. She doesn't apologize for how specific it is. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, right? How specific you have to be, you know, when you're doing something. This is common knowledge in the business world. But if you're not that experienced in business or you don't know much about marketing, the whole idea of, you're going out there and you're going to spread a wide net, because if you spread a wide net, you're going to attract more people. Well, that's like the one thing that they teach you not to do in marketing 101, right? That you have to get very specific. And the reason for that is very simple. If you get very specific, you have to speak directly to people, to the person who wants what you offer. And it's a very specific thing. And that person knows they want it. And if you're sounding very generic, you're not going to speak that person's language, and they won't hear themselves in what you're offering. All right. So it is you necessarily have to get very specific. But what we are saying here is that in doing so, the expert doesn't really try to be everything to everyone. You don't discount your price because someone else someone raises an eyebrow for you asking money for something so specific. And the truth of the matter is, the minute somebody decides they're going to pay you for that, then you know that what you're offering does have the value, because nobody is going to keep paying for something that doesn't have value, right? So again, the private expert chooses her audience. Instead of teaching whoever the system places in front of her, she identifies a specific adult who needs what she has, and she makes an offer to that person. The private expert gets paid what the market will bear for genuine expertise, not what the salary says you should get for that service. And here's the part that I find most important. The private expert still cares deeply about the people she teaches. So the identity shift doesn't change your values. It doesn't make you a mercenary, or it doesn't make you a guru in a rented Ferrari, right? It just means that the same care and craft and commitment that you've been bringing to a classroom for 15 years, you now bring to a different context, for a different audience, at a different price point. Same person, expanded identity. I made this shift. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in stages. The salsa school was one of those stages. The moment I stopped thinking of myself as a social worker who happened to dance, and started thinking of myself as someone who could, build a learning environment around something people loved and charge them for the privilege of being in that environment, then everything changed. And then when I decided to start a company to assist others to make the same change, that was another stage again. Not just financially, I had to sell out in terms of how much time and money I was willing to invest in building my own company. And it changed the way I carried myself, the way I talked about what I did, and the way I designed the experience, So the identity shift comes first, and the business follows. That's how it works. And full disclosure, I'm only like 2 steps ahead of you guys. I mean, I have a coach and people who I'm learning from, and they might be 2 or 3 or 5 steps ahead of me. And as I get this this as I roll this out, because I might have been preparing for this for 15 years, right? I started preparing way back in 2010. My fervent wish is that all the things that I went through to get to this point where I'm actually launching the company, you won't have to spend all of that time doing all the research and figuring out what is what, right? So what I'm offering you here is a condensed um, picture of my experience over the last 15 years, and then I'm rolling that out very quickly to you guys. Excuse me. So again, full disclosure that I'm just a couple steps ahead of you folks, and we're hoping that we all carry it with us over the next couple of months. But I don't see any comments. And since we started way late because of me not recording when I was supposed to be recording, I think I pressed the button, but it didn't really go off. There was one question from Everine, right? And I think that question, you're going to have to excuse me for not bringing, I know I wrote it down, but I don't have what I wrote down in front of me. But I do remember the question. The question was, what was the time and money investment in starting something like this? And if I'm to give that question the attention it deserves, I'm going to have to give you the two extremes, right? Because one extreme is not what I advocate, and then what I advocate is just the opposite of that extreme that I'm going to paint to you right now. You can go on Udemy or Skillshare of one of those kinds of educational platforms, and it doesn't take you much of an investment because you don't own anything. You don't have to invest any money. You don't have to build a website. You don't have to do your own marketing. You don't have to do anything except put your course together and dump it on the website, and they take care of the market and everything. They set the prices, everything, right? That's not what I advocate. If you've been listening to me over the last couple of weeks, I call that an information dump, and it is exactly what is responsible for the 5 to 15% completion rate in the online course industry, right? And if you've been listening closely to my rants, I'm advocating just the opposite. Instead of just dumping information, I have come to the teaching profession and asked teachers to come into the online teaching industry because there's a lot of money to be made out here. People are hungry for you to offer them what you've learned how to do, but you can do a much better job than what's happening now out there in the marketplace. Because again, I think that people out here who are offering these services are not doing that good a job because of, as we see, the result is that the completion rate is so low. I fervently believe that as teachers, you're the ones who actually should be out here making people know what your expertise is. And again, I keep hammering this point, and I'm going to keep hammering it. It's not just your subject. It's a lot. You've been gathering much more expertise than just your subject over the years that you've been teaching. All right. And so to answer the question, I'm going to have to tell you that you have to, I mean, you can put more time into it and put together your course and everything. I won't be spending a whole lot of time teaching you how to put your course together. You guys are good enough at that already. You've done online education during the pandemic, so that part you know. And you can spend as much or as little time as you want. You can condense it into a 2-3 week period, or even a weekend, or you could stretch it out over 6 months, depending on how big your topic is. My time is going to be spent on teaching you the marketing and building an audience part of it that goes along with it, because that is a part that you don't know as yet. And so that is going to be requiring at least 5 to 10 hours per week. Okay. And that's a ballpark figure, because again, it a lot depends on the subject that you're going, or the expertise that you're going to be offering, what your niche is going to be. All right. Good. So let's continue. I'm not going to answer any more questions because of us being so late this week. But I had to tackle that one because that one came in the replay. All right. Okay, so I want to move on now to something I want to tell you before I go. We've been building towards something over the last 4 weeks, and it's almost ready. So we're going to be talking about that. But before we start talking about that, I have another announcement that I need to make. All right. Tomorrow, Friday, please check the replay for this live stream for my announcement about going live. I'm going live in the private Facebook group on Monday at 6:30 p.m. This will be a deeper dive into the topic we just covered. And the name of the Facebook group, please take it down and search for it. You go on Facebook, do a search for the Career Educators Second Act Income Hub. Once again, the Career Educators Second Act Income Hub. I'll also link this in the comments that you're going to see tomorrow in the replay. And in that broadcast on Monday, I'm going to get practical about what this identity shift that we've been talking about tonight, what it actually looks like in the first few weeks of making it. All right. We're going to go over the 3 signs you're still operating from as a public servant without realizing it, and the specific moves that start to change this. So that's on Monday. And finally, for tonight, I also want to tell you something before I go. We have been building towards this over the last 4 weeks, and it's almost ready. On May the 10th, I'm hosting a live masterclass entitled How Career Educators Are Turning 15 plus years of expertise into a profitable second act without adding a single hour to their work week. And I know we've just mentioned to you that it's going to take at least 10 to 15 hours per week, but that's in learning everything and putting it together, right? We're talking about asynchronous education. So once it's there, you're going to cut down on the time drastically, and you won't have to put in the amount of time. But in building an audience and building your course and launching your business, yes, that will take some time. Once it's launched, I don't see you having to take too much out of your classroom or the time you're spending in school. The masterclass is free. It's live, and it is the most complete picture I've put together of exactly how the shift from the public servant to the private expert happens. And we're going to be doing this step by step. with a very specific framework that I've been building towards this entire time. Registration opens very soon. And if you want to be the first to know the moment the doors open, come into the private group. So everything happens within the private group. And the name of the private group, one last time, the Career Educators Second Act Income Hub. All right. That community is where I'm making that announcement first. The link will be in the comments, and I'll see you there on Monday. Thanks for coming, and thanks for sticking with me through not recording on time. And we'll see you on Monday. Over and out.